It was Christmas morning. The fire was glowing. The house smelled like cinnamon and pride. They called me ungrateful. Right there, under the tree they thought they owned. Gifts, laughter, fake smiles. But one envelope changed everything. One Christmas morning. One secret. And an entire family's illusion shattered in seconds. My name is Dana. I'm 38 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The smell of cinnamon cider drifted through the house like a memory I didn't want. It curled under my nose, sweet and cloying, the same scent that had greeted me every Christmas for the last 12 years. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, tall and perfect, drowning in gold ribbon and crystal ornaments that caught the firelight and threw it back like cold little knives. The fire itself crackled low in the stone hearth, popping every few seconds, sending sparks up the chimney the way their words used to send little sparks of shame through my chest. The room was loud the way only money can be loud. Paper tearing, fake delighted gasps, cousins shrieking over new Apple Watches and designer purses still in dust bags. Someone had already spilled Prosecco on the cream rug, and no one cared because it would be replaced by mourning. I sat on the edge of the brocade sofa, hands folded in my lap, the envelope heavy against my thigh like a second heartbeat. I wasn't shaking anymore. I had stopped shaking months ago. They were my husband's family. Old Southern money, or at least the kind that liked to pretend the Civil War was a minor misunderstanding. The women wore pearls even on Christmas morning, hair blown out like they were headed to a garden party instead of opening presents in a house heated to 74 degrees. The men smelled like oak-aged scotch and the faint cedar of closets full of suits they only wore twice. Their traditions were museum pieces, place cards handwritten in calligraphy, the same Wedgwood pattern used every year, the same stories told about Granddaddy's place on the lake. Like it was Versailles. And me. I was the girl from a zip code that didn't appear on their mental map of the world. I grew up in a double-wide outside mobile, learned to cook on an electric stove with one working burner, and somehow ended up married to the golden son who never quite noticed the temperature had been turned down on me the day I said I do. It never mattered how carefully I wrapped the gifts. How many hours I spent hunting down the exact cashmere throw his mother once mentioned in passing. How I memorized every allergy, every childhood story, every preferred bourbon. I could have served them ambrosia on golden plates, and they still would have found a way to remind me I was eating at the table, only because someone had taken pity. That morning, I had wrapped my small stack of presents with fingers that finally felt steady. Plain red paper, satin ribbon, no glitter, just care. For his mother, I had tucked in a handwritten copy of her own mother's pecan pie recipe, the one she'd mentioned once, offhand, 15 years ago, when we were all drunk on New Year's punch. I had called archives in Little Rock, paid a retired librarian in Fayetteville to dig through church cookbooks from 1957, and finally found it on a yellowed index card in a box of estate papers. I copied it in my neatest handwriting, slipped it inside the box with the antique silver pie server I'd had engraved. She opened it, lifted the lid, and the corners of her mouth turned down like she'd smelled something spoiled. "Some people are just ungrateful," she said to the room, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We give her everything, and she gives us this." Her sister gave that short, sharp exhale that passes for laughter in their circle. One of the cousins leaned over, whispered something behind a manicured hand. My brother-in-law chuckled into his cider, and my husband, Grant, stared at the hardwood floor like it might open and swallow him whole. He adjusted the cuff of his cashmere sweater, took another slow sip, and said nothing. I felt the words land the way I'd felt them land 100 times before, only this time they didn't bruise. They just settled, cold and final, like snow on a grave. The ribbon in my lap was still perfect. I smoothed it once with my thumb. This family had spent years writing the same story. Poor little Dana, lucky to be here, lucky to be kept. They handed me scraps of approval the way you toss a dog a bone and expect it to wag forever. And like most women raised to be polite, I smiled, said thank you, and swallowed the splintered pieces. That morning, the envelope in my lap was the last piece. I waited until the frenzy died down, until the last iPhone was unboxed, the last forced hug exchanged. The last niece disappeared into the sunroom with her VR headset screaming digital snow down over her eyes. Someone started talking about July 4th at the lake house, who got which bedroom, whose college boyfriend could come, whose new fiancé was finally appropriate. Bryce, Grant's cousin, the one who still thought boat shoes were a personality, tossed an arm over the back of the sofa and grinned. "I call the downstairs King Suite this year," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "Unless Dana wants to claim that one too." The laugh that followed was soft, practiced, the sound of people who had never been told no in their lives. I tapped my glass twice with my wedding ring. The crystal sang, clear and high, cutting through the chatter like a blade. The room didn't fall silent all at once. It never does with people like this. They're too accustomed to being the ones who decide when silence happens. But heads turned. Slowly. Curious. "Since we're talking about gratitude," I said. Voice perfectly level. "I think now is a good time to open this." I slid my finger under the wax seal, broke it with a soft snap. The envelope was heavy cream stock, my new initials embossed in gold. DAL, no more hyphen. I pulled out the single folded document, crisp and thick, the county seal already catching the firelight. "This," I said, letting it unfold so they could all see the notary stamp, the signatures, the official recording numbers, "is the finalized deed to the lake house on Kiowee. Mortgage satisfied in full as of November 29th. Title transferred to me alone." You could almost hear the air leave the room. My mother-in-law leaned forward, pearls swinging. "What did you just say?" "It's mine," I answered, calm, the way you state the weather. "I paid cash to your parents when they quietly decided to sell 3 years ago. I've been making the payments, the taxes, the renovations, the dock permits, all of it. Legally, solely, irrevocably mine." Bryce tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. That's not how it works." "It is when you're the one writing the checks." I turned the page so the payment history faced them. Every line item, every zero. Every Memorial Day barbecue, every 4th of July fireworks show you watched from the boat dock. Every Instagram post about our family's happy place. All of it happened on my property. Grant finally looked up. His face had gone the color of ash. "You never told me." "No," I said gently. "I never did." I let my eyes move across every face. Aunt Linda clutching her necklace like it might protect her. Uncle Paul opening and closing his mouth. The cousins suddenly very interested in their phones. His mother's voice was barely above a whisper now, shaking with something that wasn't quite rage yet. "Why would you do this without telling anyone?" "Because you would never have believed I could." I folded the deed once, twice, slid it back into the envelope. "And because I was tired of asking permission to exist in rooms you kept telling me I didn't belong in." Aunt Linda tried. "But that house is family history. And I just paid 7 figures to keep it in the family." I met her eyes. "You're welcome." The sarcasm hung in the air like smoke. Grant stood halfway, then sat back down, like his legs had forgotten what they were for. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket and buttoned it. The fire popped again, loud in the silence. Somewhere a gift bag tipped over and tissue paper spilled across the floor like cheap white petals. I looked at my mother-in-law one last time. "You called me ungrateful," I said. "So I thought I'd show you what you should actually be grateful for." I walked to the door. My boots didn't make a sound on the Persian runner. Behind me, the room stayed frozen, the tree lights blinking over 30 stunned faces. No one followed. No one called my name. But every single one of them heard the front door close, quiet and final, like the period at the end of a sentence they never saw coming. The cold hit me like a slap the instant I crossed the threshold, sharp December air that tasted of pine needles and chimney smoke. It burned going down, the kind of burn that reminds you you're alive. Behind me, the heavy front door clicked shut with the soft finality of a judge's gavel. Through the etched glass, I could see shadows moving inside, frantic, silhouettes jerking like marionettes with their strings suddenly cut. Voices rose, muffled but unmistakable, panic wrapped in outrage. Chairs scraped across heart pine floors. Someone swore low and vicious. They weren't talking to me anymore. They were talking about the story they'd have to rewrite now that the quiet daughter-in-law had torn the last page out of their book. I stood on the wide porch, boots planted on the frost-dusted mat, and let the night settle over me. The porch light painted everything gold and cold. My breath came out in slow white ribbons. I watched them curl, rise, disappear. In, out, in, out. My pulse was steady for the first time in years. I caught my reflection in the dark window, cheekbones lit orange by the lantern, eyes calmer than they had any right to be. A woman they had measured, weighed, and always found wanting. A woman who had just redrawn the map they thought they owned. I did not rush. You don't sprint from a victory you waited 12 years to taste. The door opened again behind me, a cautious slice of warmth and cinnamon spilling out before it closed. Grant stepped onto the porch, shoulders hunched inside his camel coat, breath fogging fast. He looked like a man who had just discovered the floor beneath him was ice and getting thinner by the second. "Dana." His voice cracked on the second syllable. "What the hell just happened in there?" I turned slowly. The lantern light carved hollows under his eyes. He was still handsome in that careless, inherited way. Hair a little mussed now, the cashmere collar turned up like armor. "I told the truth," I said. The words felt clean coming out. No apology stitched to the end. "You bought the lake house." He said it like he was testing the sentence for cracks. "Without telling me." I let the silence answer first. Wind moved through the magnolia trees, rattling the stiff leaves. "I told you 3 years ago your parents were quietly shopping it," I said. "I asked if you wanted to save it. You were stretched thin with the firm, you said. You said we couldn't swing it unless the family all pitched in. Remember what you told me when I asked who would organize that?" He looked away toward the dark lawn. He remembered. "You said, 'Dana, just let it go. It's only a house.'" His jaw flexed. "I didn't think you'd—" "You didn't think." I finished for him, gentle, almost kind. "That was the problem, Grant. You never had to." Scrubbed a gloved hand over his face, the leather creaking. Inside, someone's voice pitched high enough to cut through the walls. His mother, I thought. Equal parts, fury and fear. "My mom is losing her mind," he muttered. "She'll survive," I said. "She's survived worse. Like the year she wore white after Labor Day." He flinched. A small, involuntary jerk of the shoulder, the first honest reaction I'd seen from him in months. I stepped down from the porch. My boots left perfect prints in the thin layer of snow that had fallen while we opened presents and pretended to be civilized. The gravel crunched under me, deliberate, unhurried. The SUV sat under the lantern like it had been waiting for this exact night. He followed a few steps behind. "Dana, please. Can we just go inside and talk?" before this turns into World War whatever? I stopped at the driver's door, keys already cold in my palm. We are talking. Not like this. Not out here where they can watch through the window. I glanced back. Sure enough, curtains twitched in the formal living room, shadows pressed close to the glass. Let them watch, I said. They spent years making sure I felt seen only when it embarrassed me. Turnabout feels educational. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. You dropped a bomb on Christmas morning. No, I said, voice low, almost tender. I stopped sweeping up the shrapnel you all kept throwing. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from someone's chimney a street over. Somewhere a dog barked once, sharp and lonely. He took another step. Their family? I met his eyes. So am I. That landed harder than anything else I'd said all night. I watched it hit him square in the chest, watched the air leave his lungs in one slow cloud. He had nothing left that didn't sound pathetic, and we both knew it. I need a minute, he said finally, voice small. Take all the minutes you want. I opened the door, slid behind the wheel. The interior light came on soft and golden. I pulled the door closed without slamming it. Didn't peel out. Didn't rev the engine. I simply put the car in reverse and backed down the driveway like a woman who had nowhere left to rush. In the rear view, the porch light shrank, then the house, then the whole street of perfect columns and perfect lies. Christmas lights blurred into watercolor streaks on either side of the road. Red, green, gold, white. Every house glowing warm except the one I'd just left. My phone buzzed against the console. I knew who it was before I looked. Virginia Langford. How could you humiliate us like that on Christmas? 30 seconds later. We need to discuss boundaries and summer scheduling immediately. I let the screen go dark. I was halfway home before the memory rose, uninvited but welcome. The first time Grant brought me to the lake house. I was 24, terrified, wearing a sundress I'd borrowed from my cousin because I didn't own anything that looked like old Money Lake casual. The long gravel drive lined with cypress, the way the house appeared all at once, white clapboard and green tin roof, wide porches wrapping around like open arms, the lake itself so still it held the sky hostage. I remember standing on the dock in barefoot awe while Grant laughed and said, "Welcome to the family, babe." I had believed him. I believed them all. Years slid by. The paint peeled. The boathouse roof sagged. They kept coming for long weekends, posting filtered photos of sunset cocktails and monogrammed koozies, then leaving me to winterize the pipes and pay the electric bill they'd forgotten again. I scrubbed Saltillo tile on my knees while they played beer pong on the deck I'd just stained. I patched screen doors with a staple gun and duct tape while they told dinner guests how lucky they were to have such a helpful little addition to the family. Helpful. That was the word they loved. Never equal, never owner, just helpful. The summer Grant's father sat me down on the end of the dock, feet dangling above the dark water, and told me the truth. Taxes were crushing them. Upkeep was impossible. They were months from listing it with a developer who wanted to raise the house and put up condos. I asked why no one else would help carry it. He'd looked at me with tired, kind eyes and said, "Because you're the only one who loves the place more than you love the idea of being important." 2 months later, he was gone. Heart attack on the golf course. And the vultures started circling the deed before the dirt settled on his grave. So I made phone calls, took freelance branding jobs at night after 10-hour agency days, said no to vacations, yes to overtime. I paid the back taxes first, then the insurance, then the roof. I became the silent partner the family never knew they had. Every invoice, every permit, every coat of paint on those peeling shutters, mine. I pulled into my own driveway, quieter street, Smaller house, but paid for free and clear. The porch light I left on for myself glowed soft yellow. My Christmas tree waited in the window, modest, real, strung with lights that didn't try to impress anyone. Another buzz. This time, I looked. Aunt Holly. I always knew you were stronger than all of us combined. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I sat in the warm car a long time, reading those words over and over until they settled somewhere deep and aching behind my ribs. Not tears, just breathing. The kind of breath you take when you realize someone was watching after all. Someone saw. I got out, boots crunching on my own gravel. The air smelled like frost and wood smoke and possibility. I walked up my steps, turned the key in my own lock, and stepped inside. Warm light washed over me. Home. And for the first time in 12 years, the word tasted true. Little did I know, the real storm was only beginning to gather on the horizon. 2 days after Christmas, I stood in the fluorescent hum of the county clerk's office, the kind of place that smells like old paper and industrial cleaner. A line of tired people shuffled forward, clutching numbers like lifelines. I held mine loosely. I already knew how this ended. When my number lit up on the board, I walked to the counter and slid my ID across the scarred formica. The clerk, a woman with kind eyes and a Santa Claus pin still on her sweater, typed my name, printed the pages, stamped them with the raised seal that makes things real. She slid the thick manila envelope toward me. She glanced at the address on the top sheet and her eyebrows lifted, just a fraction. "That big white house on Kingsford Point?" she asked, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "That's the one." She smiled, warm, the kind strangers give when they recognize a quiet win. "My husband and I kayak past it every spring. It's gorgeous. You're lucky." I met her eyes. Luck had nothing to do with it. She laughed softly like she understood exactly what I meant, and handed me the receipt. Walking out, I passed newlyweds clutching marriage certificates like they'd won the lottery, an old man arguing about a fence line, a young mother crying quietly over guardianship papers. All of us drawing borders in ink, trying to protect what mattered. I tucked the envelope into my bag and felt the weight settle against my hip, solid, undeniable. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Grant sat across from me at our kitchen table, the one we bought at an antique mall the first year we were married, back when we still laughed over chipped paint and mismatched chairs. The overhead light carved shadows under his eyes. He hadn't slept much. Neither had I, but for different reasons. He set his phone face down, like that could stop the buzzing. His mother had left 3 voicemails since noon, each one sweeter than the last until the final 30 seconds when the claws came out. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying," he said, voice rough, like the words scraped on the way up. I let the silence sit between us. Outside, the neighbors' Christmas lights blinked red bleeding color through the blinds. "I let them treat you like you were lucky to breathe the same air," he went on. "I told myself it was just how they are, that you were tougher than their nonsense. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I traced the rim of my coffee mug with one finger. The apology was late, but it was real. I could hear the difference. "They want us at Sunday dinner," he said. "Mom says it's time to heal, to put family first." I almost laughed. Almost. "I'll be at the lake," I told him. He looked at me then, really looked, and I watched something shift behind his eyes. Recognition. Maybe fear. The woman sitting across from him wasn't the one who used to flinch when his mother sighed too loudly. "Are we okay?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I looked down at the rings on my left hand, the diamond he'd picked out with his mother's help, the band that had started to feel like a cuff. I twisted it once, slowly. "I don't know yet," I said. He nodded. Didn't push. For the first time in years, he didn't try to fix it with charm or money or distraction. He just sat there and let the truth breathe. Friday morning, I loaded the car while the sky was still pearl gray. The drive north felt different now, like the road itself recognized me. I rolled the windows down outside of town and let the cold January air slap me awake. Pine and damp earth and wood smoke. Home smells. I turned onto the gravel lane that winds through the cypress knees and felt my chest loosen with every crunch of tire. The house appeared the way it always does, sudden and perfect, white paint bright against the dark water, tin roof gleaming like it had been waiting for me to come claim it out loud. I carried my small duffel up the porch steps, set it down, and just stood there a minute. The lake was glass. A single heron lifted off the far bank, slow wing beats echoing across the water. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet wrap around me like a blanket I'd earned. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon oil and the cedar I'd burned last fall. I built a fire in the riverstone hearth, the same hearth I'd scrubbed on my knees 100 times while they drank rosé on the dock. The flames caught quick. I made cocoa the way my grandmother taught me. Real milk, real chocolate, a pinch of salt. I carried the mug out to the porch swing and wrapped myself in the faded quilt I'd left folded on the rocker for years. The sun dropped slow and gold behind the trees. The sky turned rose and violet, and finally that deep indigo that only happens over water. I sat there until the stars came out, one by one, until the only sound was the soft creak of the swing and the occasional splash of a bass hitting the surface. I slept that night with the windows cracked, lake air cool on my face, and I did not dream of their voices. Weeks slid by. The family fractured the way old houses do when the foundation finally shifts. Some sent stiff apologies through Grant. Some doubled down, posting passive-aggressive scripture quotes about pride and greed. Virginia Langford hired a lawyer in Greenville who left me a voicemail so polite it hurt. Mrs. Langford would like to discuss reserving the house for the annual 4th of July celebration. It's quite sentimental for the family. I waited 3 days, then called him back while I sanded the porch railing myself, phone on speaker, paint under my nails. "Sentiment is free," I said. "The house rents by the week. Market rate. Bookings open April 1st. Have a nice day." Click. Aunt Holly showed up one Saturday in early March with a Tupperware of lemon loaf still warm from her oven and tears in her eyes. She didn't bother hiding. We sat on the dock with our feet dangling above the water and didn't say much for a long time. "They're telling everyone you bought respect," she finally said. I laughed, soft. "I didn't buy anything, I just stopped giving it away." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Still proud of you, baby." She left before sunset, taillights disappearing down the drive, and I stood there a long time feeling the shape of those words settle in my chest like stones, smoothed by years of lake water. Some bridges burned, some simply drifted away on the current. Grant started therapy. He asked if he could visit the lake some weekends, quietly, and I said yes. Not because we were fixed, but because healing doesn't always look like staying or leaving. Sometimes it just looks like space. And I learned the difference between revenge and reclamation. Revenge screams. Reclamation just locks the door and turns on the porch light. I never raised my voice again. I didn't need to. I had the deed in a fire safe. The quiet mornings, the heron on the far bank, the creak of the swing at dusk. I had cocoa that tasted like my grandmother's kitchen and a quilt stitched by hands that never once made me feel small. I had keys. And every morning when I walk out onto that wide porch and watch the sun spill gold across my lake, I remember the girl who once wrapped gifts with shaking hands, desperate to be enough. I smile at her now. Tell her softly, gently, the way you talk to someone you finally rescued. You always were. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.